I promised you a little bit of FDR here, just by way of saying, what can a president say and do that can actually change the course of American history? In 1936, Franklin Roosevelt had passed a minimum wage. The Supreme Court knocked it down. He had passed labor protections and the right to unionize. The Supreme Court knocked it down. There was a whole series of very progressive changes that the Supreme Court kept knocking down. FDR ran for re-election in 1936 and raised absolute hell about this stuff. Absolute hell. And in 1937, when he was reelected and his second term in office began in January of 37, the Supreme Court changed their tune because they got it that the American people were behind FDR. That's the power of the presidency. Now, here's what FDR had to say in 1936. I believe that this is from a speech he gave in Madison Square Garden when he was running when he was accepting the nomination of his party for re-election for his second term. And he starts out talking about how, early on in this country, we didn't have billionaires and we didn't have, the modern industrial behemoths, but they came along with the Industrial Revolution. Here's the first clip.
That very word, freedom, in itself and of necessity suggests freedom from some restraining power. In 1776, we sought freedom from the tyranny of a political autocracy, from the 18th century royalists who held special privileges from the crown.
And then he continues.
Struggle. But since that struggle, man's inventive genius released new forces in our land, forces which reordered the lives of our people. The age of machinery, of railroads, of steam and electricity, the telegraph and the radio, mass production, mass distribution, all of these combined to bring forward a new civilization, and with it a problem for those who sought to remain free. For out of this modern civilization, economic royalists carved new dynasties. New kingdoms were built upon concentration of control over material things. Through new uses of corporations and banks and securities, new machinery of industry and agriculture, of labor and capital, all undreamed of by the fathers, the whole structure of modern life was impressed into this royal service.
All right, he's talking about the rise of the oligarchs. He continues.
Private enterprise, indeed, became too private. It became privileged enterprise, not free enterprise.
Who's he sound like? Yeah, who's he sound like? Okay, they continue. Next clip.
The royalists I have spoken of, the royalists of the economic order, have conceded that political freedom was the business of the government, but they have maintained that economic slavery was nobody's business. They granted that the government could protect the citizen in his right to vote, but they denied that the government could do anything to protect the citizen in his right to work and his right to live.
And I would say today it's even worse than that, because back then corporations were not political, and now and billionaires are not political, and now you've got Koch brothers funded groups like ALEC that are sponsoring legislation to make it harder for citizens to vote. right? Back then, at least the corporations and the billionaires said, well, yeah, sure, you can vote, you can have a government, just don't mess with our business. FDR says we're going to do something about that. Here he is again.
These economic royalists complain that we seek to overthrow the institutions of America. What they really complain of is that we seek to take away their power. Our allegiance to American institutions requires the overthrow of this kind of power.
Requires the overthrow of this kind of power. Man, it's like sitting in a Bernie rally. Yeah, here's the next clip. And this is where he wraps it up.
In vain, they seek to hide behind the flag and the Constitution. But in their blindness, they forget what the flag and the Constitution stand for. Now, as always, for over a century and a half, the flag, the Constitution, stand against a dictatorship by mob rule and the overprivileged alike. And the flag and the Constitution stand for democracy, not tyranny, for freedom, not subjection.
There you go. That's it, right? That's the group of them. Okay, that's from now he was running. That was when he was running for re-election. On that platform, this guy was re-elected president of the United States 4 times. The Republicans were so horrified by that they passed a constitutional amendment saying that no president could be elected more than twice. I mean, that's how successful that kind of rhetoric was in getting a guy elected president of the United States and transforming America. And Franklin Roosevelt transformed America.